Good morning. Thank you, Deanne, for that prelude. Welcome everyone to this service of worship where we can be together, though not physically so. A reminder to keep your microphones and cameras off except where noted. I will light a candle. I invite you to do so as well if you have one with you. This represents Christ among us. Again, Christ with each of us, even though we're physically apart. Let me hand that to my trusted assistant. The call to worship this morning is inspired by Psalm 139. We will all read the bold part, and I will read the regular print part. Please read it, but leaving your microphones off. Together, God, you search me and know me. Before I sit, you know when I will rise. God, you search me and know me. Before I speak, you know what I will say. God, you search me and know me. In my joy and despair, in my breathing in and breathing out. God, you search me and know me. Your knowledge is too deep to reach, too vast to comprehend. God, you search me and know me. Search me, O God, and know my heart. The opening hymn is number 46 from the hymnal, I Sing the Mighty Power of God.
I sing the mighty power of God that made the mountains rise, that spread the flowing seas abroad and built the lofty skies. I sing the wisdom that ordained the sun to rule the sky. The moon shines full at God's command, and all the stars obey. I sing the goodness of the Lord that filled the earth with food. God formed the creatures with a word and then pronounced them good. Lord, how thy wonders are displayed where'er I turn my eye. If I survey the ground I tread or gaze upon the sky, there's not a plant or flower below, but makes thy glories known. And clouds arise and tempests blow by order from thy throne, while all that borrows life from thee is ever in thy care. There's not a place where we can flee, but God is present there.
We are now at the point where we will have our children's time. If there are any kids here, feel free to turn on your not your microphones, turn on your cameras, leave your microphones muted, and we will hear this children's time.
The time in the service when we typically have the offering. For our prayer of thanksgiving, I'll be reading 749 from the hymnal. O God, our offerings proclaim that work and worship are one, that life is undivided. Use these gifts for your church's ministries of reconciliation, service, and mercy. Amen. And the next hymn is from Sing the Journey 118. And I forgot to remind you last time to please sing along, but with your microphones off. You may have your cameras on.
Thy holy wings, O Savior, spread gently over me, and let me rest securely through good and ill in thee. O be my strength and portion, my rock and hiding place, and let my every moment be lived within thy grace. Let me nestle near thee within thy downy breast. Oh, I will find sweet comfort and peace within thy nest. Oh, close thy wings around me and keep me safely there. For I am but a newborn and need thy tender care. Oh, wash me in the waters of Noah's cleansing flood. Give me a willing spirit, a heart both clean and good. Oh, take into thy keeping thy children great and small. And while we sweetly slumber, enfold us one and all.
Thank you to the Newman family, -1 today, apparently, for leading the music. Today's scripture reading is from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 13, verses 24 to 30. I'll be reading it from NRSV. He put before them another parable. The kingdom of heaven may be compared to someone who sowed good seed in his field. But while everybody was asleep, an enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and then went away. So when the plants came up and bore grain, then the weeds appeared as well. And the slaves of the householder came and said to him, Master, did you not sow good seed in your field? Where then did these weeds come from? He answered, An enemy has done this. The slave said to him, Did you want us to go and gather them? But he replied, No, for in gathering the weeds, you would uproot the wheat along with them. Let both of them grow together until the harvest. And at harvest time, I will tell the reapers, collect the weeds first and bind them in bundles to be burned, but gather the wheat into my barn.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. As I thought about today's parable, I thought about the wheat and the weeds being left together in the field, and how in the parable, we are the wheat and the weeds. But nobody in the parable asks how the wheat feels about being left with the weeds until the harvest. Nobody asked them how they felt about the farmer's decision. And it made me think about how we've all felt so much righteous anger in the last several months. As a country, we've tried to deal with a pandemic. We've been told to wear masks, to stay home, to be socially distant from one another. And so many of us have committed to that. But so many others have said, no, my needs, my desires, my comfort are more important than that of my neighbor. It made me think of racism in our country, an issue that has affected people for over 400 years. But now, as it comes back up to the forefront of white consciousness, there are so many people that say, no, we're done with racism. We freed the slaves. We passed the civil rights movement. What more could be done? And when issues like the racial wealth gap, self-segregation, denial of racism are pointed out to them, they refuse to do even the smallest thing to address the issue. These are only the two most relevant issues in our society. At any other Sunday, I could go on to speak about women's rights or socioeconomic inequality, healthcare rights. Ad nauseum, I could go on. The list of systems that till fertile ground for injustice to grow is endless. And so our frustration and rage of being wheat among the weeds is endless as well. In times like these, it's tempting to ask God, why? Why is this allowed to continue? Why would an omnipotent God allow oppression and injustice? I believe the most insidious answer to this question is to say, well, God has a plan. This answer implies that oppression and stratification of society is meant to be. It's sanctified as part of God's plan, and it legitimizes systemic issues that cause people pain. Why should we try to change the structure of society if it's a part of God's plan? And indeed, a quick reading of this parable could support that idea. The wheat and the weeds are allowed to flourish together. The wheat rises in spite of the weeds, and the weeds are allowed to choke out whatever wheat that they see fit. The farmer stands back, distant, and watches it all, waiting only until the final judgment to punish the weeds for their misdemeanor. I know that I've often said that the meaning of Jesus's parables comes in the contradictions. The kingdom of heaven is not like the kingdom of earth. Farmers today spray their crops to remove the weeds from their fields well before harvest. If the farmer in this parable does something different, the meaning of the parable must be found in his action. However, all of the rest of Jesus's life tells us that the meaning cannot be an acceptance of the status quo. There must be a deeper meaning behind this parable. One of the commentaries that I read suggested that perhaps this parable simply means we shouldn't judge other people. Judgment is up to God. If we attempt to divine the intent of another person's actions, we risk assigning someone to the weeds category rather than the wheat category. I believe, though, that this message goes so much deeper than just that. One of the failures of metaphor is that you can only extend a metaphor so far before it begins to break apart. The parable of the wheat and the weeds is not adequate to fully describe how we as humans, as followers of God, can interact with one another. As you walk through a field of grain, one of the things that's abundantly clear is the difference between weeds and wheat. Further, one of the things that I know I've never seen, maybe you have, I don't know, is a weed turning into wheat or a wheat turning into a weed. This is something that we do know is true for humans, though, that change is possible. That as wheat, our calling is to make that change among other people. If God were to come down and simply remove all of the weeds from the field of earth in one fell swoop, where would our witness be? What difference would we be able to make for those people? Yes, this parable does talk about the final judgment. But until then, if we truly are wheat, if we truly are people of God, are we meant to sit back, to simply wait until that separation occurs? No. I think we are meant to make change. And to do that, I believe that listening is key. First, we must listen to our traditions, but we must be also willing to let them go. Traditions are one of the clearest voices of those who came before us, a way for our ancestors to share their experiences with us. I grew up eating rice and curry as a family meal. It was because my grandfather spent 10 years working with MCC in Kenya, and that recipe came across the Atlantic with my family. It reminds us all of that time my grandfather spent in service. Together as a church, we share the traditions of communion and baptism, actions that were laid out for us by Christ and have been carried forward by hundreds of generations of believers. However, we must also be willing to adapt these traditions to God's calling and the needs of the people around us. If need be, we must even be willing to let these traditions go. It's traditional for North American Mennonites to sing hymns together. It's traditional for us to share the communion cup, to shake hands, to hug, to eat meals together. But the people around us who worship with us need their lives and their health more than they need traditions. Traditions are a source of growth and remembrance, but they cannot sustain us without God and without each other. Second, we must listen to our own experiences, but also to the experiences of others, especially those that we disagree with or that come from a background that is different than ours. If half of a field of wheat is flooded, it is equally true that a plant on one side of the field is drowning and a plant on the other side of the field is getting exactly what it needs and is growing heartily. Both perspectives are true, but there is an urgent need to care for the drowning plant. Only through listening and reaching out beyond our comfort zones can we weigh and react to the needs of the people around us. Finally, we must listen to God for guidance on what we should do and where we should go. Christ lived his life among the downtrodden and oppressed of society. He fed the hungry and healed the sick. As difficult as it is, the reason that God leaves the wheat among the weeds is that we have been given, all of us, an opportunity to make changes. Not all of us are 100% wheat, and not all of us are 100% weeds. Each of us is given the chance to work at changing ourselves and changing each other for the better, to better follow the example Christ put before us, to listen and to create change. If we do not work to make change, if there are no weeds around us, our beliefs and our witness mean nothing. To be among the weeds is our greatest source of hurt and frustration, but it is also our greatest opportunity to live our faith. This is our calling. Let it be so.
We will continue sing the journey 40 as rain from the clouds.
As rain from the clouds will your word come to earth, as snow from the heavens refreshing the land, and soften our soil that the good seed may grow, and ripen rich fruit to return to your hand. We praise you, our God, for the dew of your word. We thank you, our gardener, for your tender toil. We bless you, best farmer, for hundredfold yield, for harvest of grace and of once barren soul. As rain that is scattered, your word has been sown on rocks and on roadways, in good earth and sand. Make fertile our soil that the good seed may grow, and ripen rich fruit to return to your hand. We praise you, our God, for the seed of your word. We thank you, good farmer, for your tender toil. We bless you, best farmer, for hundredfold yield, for harvest of grace in our once barren soil. As rain